change my mind next year, I get written up for it, but we'll see what happens. Do we need to go in here?
You good? What's going on? Anything new to them?
That's around the one that runs on double A batteries.
Right up your alley.
Usually they're these.
I don't want to know.
I found a,
Alright, and if it'll,
one of those old machines,
Oh, yeah.
I had it running for $5. Yeah, that's what
it's like $300 otherwise.
I know it.
Had a conference call today with a real life
Still
human.
paying for it.
With the real life.
Junior,
Really?
Sean Astor.
Really?
Yeah,
What's that?
he's speaking at the conference next week.
Hey, Brian, that was a movie. It's not real life.
No, I told him not to blow it for me, I said I just continue to think that's real.
It's not, but
Is he a motivational speaker? I don't know.
Yeah, it speaks on mental health.
Okay.
Patty Duke, his mom, was dying when I was schizophrenic or bipolar. And I didn't realize it would be a stepdad, it's John Astor, and he was like, yeah, I'm saying, yeah, I didn't.
That's his stuff.
Yeah, but actually, his real, like his dad actually raised him. His step, like, and he's in marathons and triathlons. But, yeah.
overachiever.
Did you read anything from Mars?
He's on vacation.
Oh, they're leaving it all later this week. No, they're back.
They're back. His truck was there today.
There's people out there.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome and good evening tonight. First on the agenda is visitors to be heard. And wishing to address the council, should use the microphone, use the podium and raise your hand to recognize. You have 2 minutes.
I'll keep it pretty brief. I'm Ruby, Zeractive Roof Sanitation. My husband and I own roofs, and we've had a lot of people from Lennox reach out to us and wish that we offered service in Lennox. And a little bit about my husband and myself. We were born and raised in South Dakota. We live in T. And so we would just like the opportunity to service Lennox as a hauler. That's it. Any questions?
I think we can, if you have a few moments, I can get you a card, we can talk tomorrow about the process for getting a license.
Okay, that sounds good.
That's you real quick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got the kangaroos sanitation, or those are,
That's the end.
The last name's Ruby.
All right.
Oh,
is it? So would that be 3?
Oh,
is there a limit?
Competition, trying to get cars for
Okay, next up is consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Did you read the agenda?
Oh,
Or just, was there, cause I didn't.
I'm sorry, we didn't get the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I don't have it on there.
Okay.
That's why it's not on there. All right, so we've heard agenda. And now consent agenda, we had a motion, did we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second consent agenda, any discussion?
Who made the motion? I'm sorry.
Jen.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, it's probably under Nate's wheelhouse, but give everybody an update kind of on the pedal pals thing there. The drawings have been looked over by that group. They were okay with everything, so now we're kind of on to, trying to get maybe those raised beds done this fall,
Okay.
so they can transplant everything. Talked to Stockwell before I came here tonight. They weren't really crazy about putting together prices for the material, just the material, because they deal a lot with labor, so I'll see what I can come up with on prices, whether they're framed, treated lumber or block or whatever the case. Trying to get that workday scheduled. They said they wouldn't want to transplant anything until after Labor Day. So we'll get some prices, get some ideas together and come up with a work date after that some point, so.
Along with that, I know there was some discussion or late emails on, and I thought maybe it was on here and I should have looked and added it to the agenda, regarding the community garden. Can we discuss that here?
I think that'll be fine. I mean, it's not something that's on the regular agenda, and I don't, Amy's not here tonight, so I don't think it's something we should discuss without, having her around, so.
Can you just fill in, or maybe everybody got the email on?
I can give just a brief rundown.
Just a brief update.
So, at the last park board meeting, Amy Fisher came with a grant proposal for the LACF, Lennox Area Community Fund, to start a community garden here in Lennox. Approached the park board in terms of trying to seek space for that, a place on city-owned property that we could put that. The park board's recommendation was to use what's actually a right-of-way to the west of our old football field. So if you're familiar with where the new concession stand is and where the Ace-Off House is, there's actually a right-of-way that runs north and south along that property line. So that was where the park board had recommended placing the community garden. We've had more talk since then. There's some work that would have to go into that. We can get water to it relatively easily, but we'd have to take some trees out. Might have to do a little bit of other work in there. Talking with other, couple of council members today and maybe a little bit last week as well. We think we can get some space over at West Evergreen yet. We do have a 2-inch hydrant over there, 2-inch fire hydrant that we could use to get water over there, whether it's east of the tetherball set or whether it's west of what was the warming shelter, now kind of a picnic shelter out there. We should have room somewhere over there for it as well. So
We wouldn't have to take out a bunch of trees or anything like
I
that.
don't think you'd have to take out any trees. If you have it on the east side, there is a house to the east that has some established trees. But in terms of afternoon sun, it should get a full day of sun yet.
When this first came up, that was kind of my initial thoughts was over there would be ideal.
That is good use of that park space. I think with the volleyball courts, a new sign, a new playground, I would anticipate seeing a lot more use of that park if that grant is approved. And I think getting more people out there is better. I think making good use of that park space would be great for us. So.
What space did the Park and Rec recommend they use?
That right of way, what we call Cedar Street, just south of the new concession stand.
Did they discuss any other areas?
They did discuss West Evergreen. We weren't sure at that meeting if they had water out there, and whether there would be enough space with the new volleyball courts if the grant is approved. I'd have to go back and look at what space-wise Amy was considering, but I think we could probably fit something over there.
And can we discuss a little bit, just, not that we can take any action on it, but, so she proposes a grant to the Lennox Area Community Foundation.
Correct.
And she did submit that.
As far as I believe she did submit. I
Okay.
can go through my emails and make sure.
Okay, so that deadline was August 1. I called somebody on the Lennox Area Community Foundation today because Amy Fisher is the one who it's her name on the application. Now, there's a piece in there that says other, because they asked about nonprofit status, a governmental entity, and I was told by this person that works there that they're not gonna grant monies to an individual. They're gonna grant monies to some type of a governmental body or nonprofit. For example, every year the library, which is a city entity, applies for a grant there. Same thing happened with the pool. There was a grant to apply. So if that's the case, I don't know the logistics do we tell the Lennox Area Community Fund, we would really like to do this, if we're in agreement eventually, can we backdate that, or go in and fix that application so it can be submitted to the same date where we can still do that? I guess that's my question.
The grant was submitted, so
Okay.
it has been submitted to the Community Foundation already.
Okay.
And what he brought up, the technicality side was essentially irrelevant.
That's probably a decision for the.
That's up to the city.
LCS,
Yeah, it really is. My concern at this point is if it's already been submitted, as it's written, it has the city committing space, in my mind, as well as labor and materials, that this council hasn't voted to support that, as the park board has. So that's a concern of mine, that, we're essentially allocating, public dollars without a vote of the city council. So that worries me. I mean, it's small, sounds like a small thing, but it's kind of a big deal. If we're applying for a grant, that's going to have the city's name on it. It really needs to come before this council for that consideration.
We could probably get it on the next agenda, get some of those questions answered between now and then, I would think.
Yeah.
Have they had a lot of people reach out and want to participate in this community garden?
I haven't, but I haven't been a key point of contact for it.
There was a survey, we put a survey out, there was,
Yeah, there was some interest in it.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but there was interest.
Yeah.
There was questions.
And interest in volunteering time and labor, so. There certainly are people out there that are willing to put their muscle and energy into making this work.
I had one comment on your city administrator's report. You said there was 28 days of liquidated damages, and there was 29 in the pay app, so
Yep.
just
Yep.
in case anybody ever comes back and questions that. Are there any other comments? Okay, do roll call. Wolf.
Aye.
Welch.
Aye.
Rex.
Aye.
Riley.
Aye.
Doherty.
Aye.
Bowers.
Aye.
Right, motion passes. No old business, so right on to new business. Central Basin 2, pay application 10.
Thank you. This is, as it says, the 10th pay application for winter contracting on Central Basin 2. The application period is for the month of July. So this is work completed through July 31st. You'll note on here 29 days of liquidated damages at $1,050 per day, for a total of $30,450 in deductions. Recommend a motion to approve pay app 10.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, roll call. Bowers?
Aye.
Doherty?
Aye.
Riley?
Aye.
Rex?
Aye.
Welch?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Motion passes. And then Central Basin 3, pay application 3.
This pay application is for Slowly Construction out of Yankton for work completed through July 31st. So it's for the entire month of July, minus retainage. And of course, there are no liquidated damages on this. The contract completion is in November, so we've got quite some time to complete this project yet. So recommend a motion to approve pay app 3 for $388,068.76.
So moved.
Second.
Do they feel like they're on time?
They are, I think, within 2 days of schedule.
Okay,
Yeah. Today would have been a setback, obviously, there wasn't any work done with the rain this morning, but it is progressing, in my mind, quite well.
and in your opinion, or what, not necessarily your opinion, but in your factual observation of the underground utilities in Central Basin 3, which we were told was probably gonna be the worst part, would you agree with that?
I would. Absolutely would. There's no, just like with Central Basin 2, there's no shortage of surprises there either. But 3 has been, there's a new surprise every week, quite honestly, sometimes 2 surprises a week. We found a curb 2 weeks ago, I think, that was not there before, or was there before, and we just put dirt over top of it and put the new curb on top of that. There are sewer lines going under neighboring homes, there's sewer lines trying to connect at a 32-degree angle to the sewer main. I mean, it's a bit of a mess, but being able to watch those guys do their work, and they take it one step at a time and just tackle each challenge and move on to the next one. So gravel should be down on all of Cedar by the end of this week. They probably will hit West Second as well, if they can get a few things down there. But it looks like they're about a rough grade on Second west of Cedar, and have started removals on Juniper.
Okay, do roll call. Rex.
Aye.
Riley.
Aye.
Welch.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Bowers.
Aye.
Doherty.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have resolution 2020-8-10-01, special maintenance fee.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, you'll remember, maybe you'll remember that we brought this up I believe it was last September as well. And direction was given at that time to take a closer look at what we really need before we take this step. So with the Lennox 2035 plan that we had put forward earlier this year, and it's quite clear coming out of that as aggressive as that might have been, that maybe we need to pull back just a little bit and take this one chunk at a time. So looking at the big picture, what we need to really start down this path. So for background's sake, we maintain approximately 16 miles of street throughout the community. According to a condition assessment that we did last year, about 70% of those are failing or have failed and are in need of either resurfacing or total reconstruction. And I think it's really important to note here that traditional resurfacing like mill and overlay isn't really an option on a lot of our streets. Anybody who's spent time in my office knows that I have 2 or 3 pieces of street on my desk that I just picked up off of our roads as a reminder of what not to do. Those are just layer after layer of chip seal. There's not a whole lot of any asphalt in a lot of those streets. So in that case, mill and overlay isn't really much of an option. So we'd have to do total reconstruction. The surveys that we did with Lennox 2035 made it very clear that streets are a top priority for people who live in town. So how do we balance that with a very, in my mind, urgent need to take action on some of this stuff? So we have a few options, but not many options in terms of secured funding for street maintenance. We do leave some money in the general fund for highway and street departments. A lot of that is for general maintenance, not really what you see for slurry seals, those kinds of things. For that, we depend on the additional sales use tax funds, so the second penny. That is the only source of dedicated funding that we have for street maintenance and repairs. While that fund traditionally secures just over $300,000 in a given year, it's also used to balance the operational fund of the ambulance fund, which can account for anywhere from $20,000 to $70,000, sometimes more, in a given year. So of the revenue in that department, we also set aside funding for reserve of, I would like to say 10%. We really have about $200,000 a year for street maintenance. In the past couple of years, we've done $75,000 a year for street sealing, for slurry seal projects. So maybe another $125,000 out of that, $200,000 for actual street resurfacing and reconstruction. So while that $125,000 sounds like a lot of money, it really doesn't get us very far. You remember the asphalt repair project we did in 2019 after the spring thaw? We paid approximately $54 a square yard for that project. That was total excavation, replacing gravel. In some places we had to add surge rock because of the high water table. But averaged out to about 54 a square yard. So that would allow us to replace about 2,300 yards of street surface in a given year. That's less than 2 standard blocks of street surface. That's just not enough to make a significant dent in what we're looking at. Of the 16 miles we have in town, we have to resurface approximately 11.2 miles. Now that does include gravel streets as well. So this is 59,000 linear feet of streets. At 125,000 a year will replace about 700 linear feet of streets every year. At that rate, all the currently identified failed or failing streets will be repaired or reconstructed in the year 2104, which is 84 years away. The resolution that you have in front of you tonight is meant to shorten that time frame. Special maintenance fee is something that's allowed in South Dakota code for maintenance of, it's really a wide variety of things, but in this case we call it simply for streets. Residents would be assessed under this resolution $2 per linear foot of frontage, and that fee would be added to your annual property taxes. So a property with 7 feet of street frontage, which is pretty average in Lennox case, would see a tax increase of $140 per year. What I would recommend doing then is transferring those funds from the general fund over to the second penny, so that they are eliminated, or not eliminated, but you're not going to be digging into those funds for general fund uses. You're dedicating it towards street infrastructure. I've got a few, one screen grab didn't look quite the way I was intending it to, but a couple of screenshots on there of what we'd be looking at in terms of space, that we can replace with that first fee. At $2 a linear foot, we can expect to collect about $335,000 a year for street maintenance and repair. That would allow for an additional 6,000 square yards of repair or replacement, approximately 1,200 linear feet. I've got another figure in there for that. So we'd be able to replace a total of 8,300 square yards a year. So this fee would accelerate the replacement of those failed or failing streets by 53 years, completing them in 2051. So in summary, the currently available funding is far from what's necessary to make a significant dent in the condition of those streets. Really only reasonable, equitable solution available to the city at this point is to institute a special maintenance fee as we described in the resolution, and allow more aggressive replacement of failed infrastructure starting in 2022. I would note one more thing on here. When it comes to those gravel streets, the special maintenance fee is not something that I would recommend using for the construction of asphalt streets on those. I would still recommend using a special assessment for building a finished surface on those gravel roads in town. I would recommend a motion to approve Resolution 2020-8-10-01.
Nate, your $335,000 per year for street maintenance is above and beyond what we're currently collecting, correct?
It is.
And is that taking 16 miles times 5280 times two?
It was either 16 miles or 16.42 miles. I rounded down to 16 miles for the memo.
What are we adding with Countryside as far as curb front?
We don't know yet. We could probably figure it out pretty easily. 150 homes, let's say, at 70 feet per home.
Over 8,000.
70, let's say 70 feet times 150. So 10,500 multiplied by 2 for both sides of the street, so 20,000, 21,000. There'd be an additional 40.
A little 7.5% uptick, that's okay. What,
would that then do with this, the timeline, obviously 31 years is still absurd with this 2 months. And this little kit, I guess, let's just take 10% as a round number, we've shaped it down to 28 years. Is there an appetite for commercial assessment per linear foot being a little stronger?
I don't see why not. I mean, there are tax applications either way for commercial. And I would like to think that regardless of which direction we go with this, we're still going to see that commercial and residential growth occur in Lennox. I don't think a $2 per linear foot fee is going to change that. I don't think it's going to change commercial growth either, except to increase it. That being said, I haven't spoken with the commercial club or the LADC about that specifically, but it is an option, and there are towns that do assess commercial frontage more, simply by the basis of land use. If you have a commercial property, you're generating more traffic.
I'd love to see that explored. And again, we're talking not a whole lot of dollars, but when we're extrapolating that over a quarter century,
It might make a difference.
it might.
Yeah.
When we originally talked about this a year ago, it was kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but we looked at this as a way to simply maintain existing roads in town. This is a little different take on it than what we had initially discussed. That being said, I know, like, I've had a conversation with Brock before, how do we do this and what's been done in the past, and street projects in the past. You can throw stuff at the wall and see what, I mean, there's just a variety of it. Nobody's fault necessarily, nothing wrong with it, it's just, there's really never been a lot of consistency in funding back, or how we've gone after funding. And we had one project, we threw $1 million cash at.
Yes.
And we had another.
And the interest on that project, I think, was 2.8%.
So we could have held some of that cash back and,
Yeah.
whatever, there's just, discussions we had is, and in my opinion, I don't know, who will agree or not, but whatever we do, I think we need to find some consistency in securing funding for projects. Now, whether this is a part of that, probably is. Special assessments to property owners.
Grants,
Probably has grants, loans, whatever, but I think, to be fair to the citizens, I think we have to figure out a way to be consistent with that first.
Alleys will not be assessed, as they're not,
That's not, I mean, it's a right of way, but it's not really a street.
Right.
I don't know that we have any improved surface alleys. They might all be gravel, just
there's a couple.
Of business,
central business, yeah. To your comments, Chad, on consistency, I don't disagree at all. I think given, you look at Boynton Avenue, for example, and the combination of funding we're pursuing there are always going to be those big projects that, in my mind, are shared community projects. Main Street, Boynton, to a certain extent. Those, in my mind, require more complex funding packages, just because of their size and their complexity themselves. We'll probably pursue 5 different funding sources for that Boynton Avenue project by the end of the day. Looking forward, I'm actually sitting down with city engineer tomorrow to discuss this. We're pretty much wrapping up our current capital improvement plan. And so, Lennox 2035, which I keep adding 10 years to every time I talk about it, because 2104 now, Lennox 2104, isn't realistic. It just doesn't work for us. And I think we need to take smaller bites of that cake, so to speak. So one of the things that I've started working on for later this year is a 21 to 25 capital improvement plan. Let's update that. Let's start identifying now what streets we want to go after each year. We know next year will be South Main in the industrial area by the high school. That's a given. We know that's gonna have to happen. But what gravel streets do we go after next year? What does our funding package look like for that? What are we doing in 2022? What 3 or 4 blocks of street are we gonna resurface with the funding available? I think, a lot of the pin the tail on the donkey method of public improvement, that's where we're lacking a lot of that consistency. I remember when I first started, I asked Mitch, our city engineer, South Main, from 44 to, I think it was 5th, well, that was not our capital improvement plan, what we did in 2018. I said, well, what drove that? There isn't a really great answer to what drove that. I mean, it probably needed to be done, don't get me wrong. But sticking to that plan, whenever possible, I think is one of our best methods for consistently showing the community, here's where your money is going to go over the next 5 years. This is what you're buying with those tax dollars.
Here's my take on it. We surveyed, and when I first got on the council to take a look at what we didn't have in place, no street plan, and I was on streets as a committee starting a couple years ago. With no street plan, none. We don't know what the you could do an eyeball test, and you could do a shock and awe test of your car, and know that our streets are not good. But there was never anything done with, well, is it all blotter coat? Do we need to? There should be cores that have been done. No cores ever, and just no plan with something that. But some of my friends drive into town, that's the thing they make fun of the most. Are the just conditions, how poor the conditions our streets are. And, one of my goals coming in was, I just want to improve the streets of the community. And then we said, well, it's not necessarily what I necessarily want, but let's survey and find out what does the community think. And they say, streets is the #1 issue. Okay, great. Now we are on the same page regarding, we know that's an issue, now we need to fix it. And it would be foolish to try to fix this thing in 83 years. I think it's foolish to try to do it in 31. I think it needs to be something that's on that 2-decade mark. And how do we get there? There was a linear assessment push back in 99, 2000 that the people were up in arms about, we're not going to do it. Some wanted to do it, the majority didn't want to do it, so it was dropped. My question, I guess, was do we know how T did it? T did it when they were smaller than we are. Do we know how Hartford did it? Hartford did it when we were about the same size. They got it done. And I don't see why we can't get it done. I think that living on the gravel streets, no curb and gutter, no sidewalk, I think that is in the past of what Lennox needs to be in the future. And the really small communities, you go to Worthy, you go to Chancellor, you go to Davis, you go to these places, there's gravel streets, there's no sidewalk, curb, gutter, and that's what they've got. I don't feel Lennox is that. If you're going to drive or you're going to draw in some folk, part of it is the aesthetic value of the town, and that just looks shoddy in my opinion.
Well, aesthetics is one thing, but it's also, that's important, it's also proven if we install things properly with curb and gutter.
Right.
You're gonna have a
They're
better
gonna
product
last
that
longer.
lasts longer
Yes,
as well.
yes.
T and Hartford did sidewalks at the same time too, and I think that's something that we need to push to.
That's something I'm working into that CIP as well. If we're doing work on a street, let's talk East Run. One block was paved, one block was gravel. I think the furthest east block, if I remember right. Some of it's got curb and gutter, some of it doesn't. Some of it's got sidewalks, some of it doesn't. My intent with those blocks, if we're resurfacing, at the same time, we're going to special assess for curb and gutter, we're going to special assess for boulevard and sidewalk. We're gonna get that stuff done through special assessments. We'll still use second penny and the maintenance fee to resurface that block.
Yeah.
You go block east, we'll use special assessment for that whole block. Because the whole improvement needs to happen there. The one asterisk I put by all of this is we still don't know for sure what's underneath these streets in terms of sewer infrastructure.
That was gonna be my next question.
So when we should have the video by now, but we'll have a report later this year. That'll give us a good idea for, what areas we, if we're planning to do a resurfacing project on one block, and we know that there's a significant hole or gap or crack in the sanitary sewer line there, that's when we're gonna wanna take care of that. And we'll just use, sewer fund balance for that.
What's the cap on the special maintenance fee?
There is no cap.
I thought that was one that, when we talked about it last time, that there was a limit.
Yeah, I'll have to check the language of the code, but,
So one that they could only increase it so much per year, is it that
You
number?
have to pass a
you have to pass it
resolution.
each year.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a cap on special maintenance fee.
Even if we get, say, 250, I mean, 50 cents,
I know Harrisburg is
Picks
doing
up a little bit
like
more.
step up, so they wanted to get to this amount, so they started here, and every year they would go up a little bit more until they got to their end goal, and that was how they did theirs.
You were in Worthing when Hartford went through theirs, weren't you?
I think so.
Was that like over a 5-year period? Like they basically
They
just
I think
were
they
did quadrants, right? And they
The way I
say,
understand it is they just assess people.
Yeah.
right, all through special assessment. And they picked an area of town, this is year 1, this is year 2, this is year.
And the CIP would lay that out for people too.
Right.
And, my intent is if we're going to follow that CIP, what I would want to do is, this year or early next year, get letters out to the folks that are on schedule for 2022 and tell them, this is what we intend to do, this is when we intend to do it, this is how we're going to pay for it. This is what you'll probably go, and at least give them an estimate of what that would look like. We've got to do that formally later on in the year when we do any special assessment anyway. And I've got a call with Brett tomorrow morning to go over the financing options for those special assessments. You can finance special assessments with GO bonds.
Right.
Now, whether that has to be subject to an election or not, just isn't completely clear. So we're gonna talk through some of that tomorrow.
If it's not, and this is hypothetically, and we chose like a 10-year, we figured it was in the best of do a 10-year plan or a 15-year plan, and did quadrants, and special assess most of that, like other towns do, this maintenance fee proposed as $2 probably isn't that anymore, right?
If you're going to,
Special assess most of it is what I'm saying.
use special assessments instead of the fee, I think if you're going to use special assessments instead of the fee, that this maintenance fee would almost certainly decrease. But it would also still be limited to $200,000 a year for street sealing and, you'd have to get on that maintenance.
Yeah, it might just be maintenance only for that, like a
And
bump.
that's what I was
Right.
getting at, that's, this is strictly maintenance driven at that point. If we're
Yes,
reconstruct, if we're special assessing,
yes. And if you were to get
utilizing a
15
GO
years,
bond option,
yes.
if you can.
And, the nice thing about the GO bond is if it doesn't have to pass through a special election, since you're covering that bond with special assessments, that does not count towards your 5% constitutional debt limit. So you wouldn't need to exceed that limit. I mean, you would still have sizable future obligations, but it would not count against your debt limit.
You wouldn't have to opt out.
No.
What happens with corner lots?
Under this resolution, no change for any corner lots or exemptions for extra long lots or anything along those ends. In our special assessment policy, I believe we grant 75 feet to corner lots.
Because I remember there was someone in here where we had a street kind of discussion, and they live in they live on that Rummel Circle,
Circle, yeah.
Which is obviously a genuine concern if I could have a lot that is the inside curve of that 300 feet,
I don't know, I guess technically where I live,
Right.
it's considered a corner lot. Personally, I made the decision to be there.
Yeah.
So if there's maintenance that goes along with it,
So
I
we,
would expect to pay that. That's just my opinion.
yeah, and the benefit of a corner lot is you don't have neighbors on one side.
And you got a pool out there in your street too.
Right.
Yeah. Got bigger this week, it looks
So you
like.
got bigger this week.
Say last part.
Question about the additional sales and use fund. It's mentioned that the ambulance shortfall gets made up out of that fund. What other aspects of the budget have access to this fund?
No better than I would.
Pool.
We could use it for the pool.
Yeah.
We can use it for building maintenance. Facility maintenance, I guess is what I call it.
And I thought that you can build a building with it too, on a second penny, not on a third.
Right, a second.
Yeah.
So, I don't know that we've ever used it for anything other than ambulance. and
My
streets.
concern is simple protection of the fund and the extra collection, that it doesn't end up,
Going elsewhere.
yeah, when we're making a commitment to roads.
And I think, second penny, is that restriction established by state code?
And
So we can be, I would imagine we can be more restrictive, than the state code, tells us we have to be. So if this council would want to go that direction, we can further restrict those funds. I would check with city attorney, obviously, but
I think there's actually a fund for the maintenance that you can create, kind
A
of
separate
drainage.
okay.
Yeah, so then it would just be for that particular maintenance or for road construction.
So we would transfer out of general fund and put it
To that.
into a special maintenance fund.
While also keeping the portion that is being put into additional sales and use fund, now would bump over to road maintenance as well.
We certainly could. We could transfer that from second penny to the special maintenance fund. It would be-
I think that
consistent with the
accountability would be good
operations.
for what we're doing here and trying to accomplish, and the optics of what we're trying to accomplish.
And I think long-term, we've certainly made progress. We made progress last year with the ambulance shortfall. This year was trending to be a more difficult year, but I think with the CARES Act funding that'll come through the state down to us, we'll end the year well in excess of a positive fund balance with ambulance. So
Good.
I don't anticipate having to use any of the fund this year.
Great news.
One last question I have, Nate, and this is more not probably a statement than anything, but, you know, this resolution, if it's pursued, what kind of a timeframe do we have to have this passed for it to start being collected by the county in 2021?
End of September,
And
end of October.
So we have 2
November
months.
and we
But
have
in that timeframe, we have to collect all of that data
Right.
on those frontages. And we've talked to Stockwell, they can quite easily get that.
They can pull that together. Okay.
We've got files that we can already dump that data into, so.
And I just asked, knowing just kind of what's been talked about here, you know, do we, I mean, I'm not sure right at this moment that I would want to vote on it right now. But some of these things have come to light, but.
My suggestion, hearing the conversation, and I have questions from a number of you, is to look at 3 different things. Number one, explore commercial increase, whether that would be something of significant concern to our commercial and industrial partners. Nail down as close as we can what Countryside will do. And I think based on that information, maybe look at, what it would take to get us to a 25, 20, 15 year schedule instead of 31. So I would be thrilled with, so.
I'll make a motion to table resolution 2020-8-10-01.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Tabling this. Next, code enforcement proposal.
Thank you, Mayor. My memo pulled up here. So code enforcement continues to be a bit of a logistical struggle for the city. And the building inspector has available time to enforce code enforcement. So while the adjustment of putting most of that code enforcement on the police department has been Working well with a few bumps here and there. There are some more complicated issues of property maintenance code that take a longer process to resolve than a door sticker or a door hanger. So we've seen fewer building permits this year, which we did anticipate given the lack of available lots. Though I would say in the past few weeks, we've seen a bit of an uptick in siding, shingles, and a few other projects. So one of the things that Greg McMahon, our building inspector, mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago is that as he's got policies and procedures set and a few flyers set, he's changed the application. He's at a point where his work is becoming a lot more routine. And there are hours available in his time that we can task us for. So I talked to him about doing property maintenance, and he would be well suited for that role. Particularly given the work he's done on the mobile home inspections, he's very familiar with that code already. So, what I would recommend tonight is a motion to approve amending the building inspector job description to include code enforcement.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. My only, I guess too late to comment, but at the bottom, put the updated by when you changed, you added those items at the bottom of the job description.
Yes.
Next is personnel policies.
Thank you, Mayor. You'll remember back in 2019, we adopted, was a long waited, I think, personnel policies. Since that time, we've noted a few minor corrections to be made, just some grammatical or spelling errors here or there, but also some more substantive changes that may be warranted. So first, with the onset of COVID-19, we acted very quickly on authorizing remote work for employees in positions that were capable of doing remote work. Overall, I think that went really well. We didn't interrupt regular operations. Our technology was secured pretty quickly to make that process smoother. But we never had a formal remote work policy in those personnel policies. So this revision creates a remote work policy based on guidance from SHRM. Really just took what they had recommended and used that to our advantage. The second change that we're proposing in this revision is changes to our PTO, our paid time off policies. We converted from sick leave, vacation leave to PTO in 2019. Since that time, several long-serving employees have departed, requiring significant payouts of PTO and separation. Additionally, with our transition to accrual-based accounting and away from cash-based accounting, those PTO accruals now count as a cash liability on our balance sheet. So at the end of July, some of that liability was over $62,000. And that'll continue to grow as people accrue more and more PTO. So the changes that I'm recommending in this revision don't allow for a different accrual rate or a different cap. Instead, it offers a way for employees to be compensated for their PTO when they're unable to use it or are approaching their accrual cap. We do have a number who are close to their accrual cap, and one that's been over it as long as I've worked here. So what this would do is it would permit employees to carry over 200 hours of PTO into every year. Any hours in addition to that would be paid out in December of each year. Employees would also be permitted to cash out unused PTO at any time, provided to maintain a minimum balance equal to half of their PTO cap, so 150 hours. That's just to ensure that if there is an unplanned absence or an extended absence, that they have some hours in their bank to access. The last change in these policies is just a technical adjustment requested by the police department. The police department is applying for some federal highway safety grants. And in order to do that, they have to have some specific language in there regarding overtime in law enforcement. So this incorporates some of that into there. So I recommend a motion to approve revisions to personnel policy.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Can I ask a question? Are we providing too much paid time off, or are people just choosing not to take paid time off, or?
Where we typically see people bumping up against that cap is in public safety, police and ambulance. I think particularly in the ambulance, I mean, if somebody's
Because in my opinion, we provide people with paid time off to get away from work and
Yes.
decompress, not write them a check at the end of every year.
Right.
So they don't take time off or they use comp days or, I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess I've got a real, I don't like this, I don't think this is what paid time off is meant to do. My personal opinion, but I'm one of six, so.
Well, I think what you're proposing here is,
I mean, someone could essentially walk in tomorrow and say, cut me a check for $200, or whatever the number is.
Yeah, they could, if we pass the policy, then they could come in tomorrow and say, I would like to cash out X many.
right now, it could be $500.
Yeah.
This is going to limit that to
They
200.
can't cash out right now.
No.
If we approve it, they can.
Right.
Right now, so if someone, let's say somebody's at that 300-hour cap right now, and tomorrow they turn in their resignation, we're paying out that $300.
Right.
So regardless of how it's paid out, at some point, this is all getting paid out anyway, whether it's paid time off.
But I would rather see people take time off than just
Agreed.
bank hours. I mean, I've worked at other places that the maximum you can carry over is 40 hours. or
Right,
80
you
hours.
lose it.
And maybe we should do, and maybe we should do that.
Policy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should look at,
No?
There's stresses in a lot of people's lives that isn't handled by days off. It can be handled more so by some additional compensation around Christmas time. And when we pay out the excess in December, this allows people who aren't making a ton of money to get extra money that they haven't budgeted for and possibly supply for their family. And I think that takes off a hell of a lot more pressure than a day off in September.
We're also no longer differentiating in between sick time and vacation time. Where other places maybe have, you get 5 days sick time per year.
not if you have PTO.
What's that?
Not typically if you have PTO, they don't give you sick days too.
Right.
We have PTO. What I'm saying is there's a lot of places that have defined illness
Vacation
leave
and sick.
and
I still
vacation
have, I have
leaves.
vacation and sick,
Well, yeah, you're a state worker, I mean.
but other places have PTO.
Right, so the idea behind bank PTO, and we do it.
I don't know, I guess I work for a company that you don't get 1 day of PTO until you've been there a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then
we don't
after
start
that-
off
and then-
that much.
And then after that, you get 5 days until you've been there 5 years, and then you get 10 days.
Well, we cap it in case there's a
Yeah, because it is.
car
it's
accident,
liability.
you know, they've got 4 weeks, 5 weeks if they need that. It's just another way to look at it.
I like retention and having people that want to work here.
Oh, I agree.
And that's a nice benefit for those folks. I think you'd appreciate that in your job, if they allowed you to cash it out. It'd be a cool little deal, wouldn't it? Take a week's pay. Give me an extra check. I like the benefit.
Well, I
But
never,
I promise not to fill out a request form tomorrow.
when I hear your argument and when you're saying it's typically ambulance and police like that, that puts me more in your camp. You know, as opposed to, well, they've got all they choose to work and they're quote unquote overworked, but they get this compensation. I mean, you know what a typically like paramedic or police officer make? It's not a boatload. It's not like selling insurance. I see, I see.
No, to me, I would rather have people take a day off than cash out 200 hours of, or 100 hours of PTO. I mean, maybe we do it as the hourly employees have this option, the salary people just take the days off.
Because how many hours can they work up to?
300 is the cap.
And how many do we give people per pay period?
Depends on the level of employee you're talking about in ballpark. The maximum is 10 hours per pay period, I think, starting is
It's
5.5 or 6.5.
Yeah.
And how many pay periods do we have in lunch?
2 point, yep. 26 pay periods a year, so just over 2.
So if you're getting the maximum of 10 hours per pay period, it's 260 hours per year.
Yes.
Okay, so how many working days is that? I mean, that to me feels like it's like you could take a month off.
Yes, you could, but keep in mind that that's both vacation and sick combined in
Well,
one.
it's PTO, PTO is PTO, it's paid time off.
Sure.
I mean, to me, that seems like a lot. And I'm not saying I don't wanna keep good employees around or anything like that, but, I mean, I don't know a whole lot of jobs that give you 250, 300 hours a year off.
Not days.
So basically, you get 300,
So 6
Your state worker doesn't count.
6.92, and this is different from what police get.
I
Police
also
get just
follow
over this.
and we get
So
240.
from 0 to 2 years,
Which is how many working days? 30?
0 to 2 is what?
6.9.
Not 10, it's 6.9.
That's 0 to 2 years of service.
Right. At 24 months, at 2 years, you go to 8.46. At 85 months,
You know, which is what,
and he reports it in months apparently.
apparently. Gotta love them. 10, you're right.
You go to 10. So right now, accruing at 10 is
Don, you know,
Dawn, maybe Will.
he might be, Will is on the police side of it, so they get a little more. But,
I am,
So the police accrue it at a higher rate as well?
yeah.
I don't know if Evelyn's there, she might be,
Oh, it's gotta be close.
yeah. Let's see.
So there's probably I would say probably 3 employees that are at that max.
Yeah.
So when they get to 260,
300.
when they get to 300, and let's say they only use 40, let's just make this easy. They use 50 hours, so they got 250 hours they didn't use. They can cash all that out and they start over at 0?
No, they can only cash out,
Down to 1.
down to half of their cap, so 150.
Gotcha.
We wanna make sure that they should.
But the
something-
but the next year, should they not use any PTO time, then they could cash out their, however many they are.
They're still capped at, yes, they're still
Yeah.
capped at
But,
300.
but as long as you keep 150, so say you have 300 this year, you cash out 150, next year you get another,
You can cash out a certain
250.
amount per pay period.
Right,
then
for
you
sure.
just,
Can you cash out just once a year, or can you cash out every time you jump above the 150?
This policy has it anytime they deem it necessary. You know, if you wanted to restrict it to
quarterly.
just at the end of the year automatically, or, you know, cap it out at a certain number of hours, you can.
But I don't like that, because if somebody wants to go on summer vacation, if we're looking at it from like a Christmas thing, why shouldn't they be able to cash it out in June if they wanna take their money and take their family on vacation?
Yeah, I don't think we should limit when they can, but.
I think maybe quarterly would be fine.
I just don't want it to be like every time.
Right.
Right,
Right, yeah.
every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
Don gets the form, Denise gets a form.
Right.
Do a semi-annual report.
Yeah.
Well, the main purpose of PTO is obviously mental health and well-being. So you can get time away from work, time with family, and then catastrophic illness, and cover your wages until you can get on long-term or short-term disability and recover from whatever it is that you're stricken with. At 300 hours, that's pretty salty. That's 7.5 weeks of pay. The typical amount of time necessary to get to short-term disability is 1 week. And long-term disability, the long-term disability, I don't know that it even has that same requirement. So it's buffering something that kind of already has a buffer. I think Chad's point of looking at the amount of hours is a valid discussion, as 300 does seem a bit exorbitant. But I would also like to know what the dollars come out to. You know, is this a $16 an hour employee that gets this benefit? That's better than a $30 an hour employee that gets this benefit. And if it's one of the reasons why it works for them in their life, that $16 an hour employee, then we like that. If it's the $30 an hour employee that always cashes out their PTO, and we need to really take a good hard look at that, then I think we need to take a good hard look at that.
Do we have an average balance of what people's PTO
the total liability based on our current balances on the far right.
So the PTO liability is the maximum amount of exposure we would have under this policy?
Should this person
Everyone
leave
have-
tomorrow?
Okay, this
That's
is
current, right?
Yeah,
Right.
this is a full phase.
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
So this isn't them cashing out down to 150.
so Will is one pay period away from maxing out,
Yeah, more than likely.
and,
Well, I think Will took some PTO last week, so
Okay.
maybe in better shape now.
we'll just leave it the way it is up there in my head so I can make sense of it. Would Will then he'd be wise to come in and say, I know I'm not gonna take 2 extra weeks off this year, can I get 80 hours of pay?
It would make sense when Will's willing to do that, yeah.
And then he'd be covered for the next 8 pay periods, or a third of a year. And that happens now,
No, it doesn't right now.
okay?
That's the proposal, right?
Right.
And
That he would be able to.
right now, he can accrue up to 500 hours.
No, 300.
300.
300
And then it's-
max.
And then it's capped, and,
Yeah, doing that, whatever over that goes into a shared bank for catastrophic.
okay.
Oh, so it's not just.
For what?
It
It's
doesn't
not just
go back.
Bob, no.
Right.
They could be the person using that, or it could be,
So what's in that bank right now
Yeah,
for
what's in
hours? And my only question on that is, so how does somebody who accrues it, who we pay, I don't know, we'll use your number, $16 an hour, and then let's say somebody that makes, I don't know,
39.
40.
$40 an hour. How does that work?
How do you balance that?
Yeah.
It's just hours, right? It's
Yeah,
not-
I mean, really.
It's not money, it's hours.
But it is money.
It is,
It is money.
Yeah.
but this, I guess.
So
city
how much
benefits-
is in that bank right now? How many hours are in that bank?
I would have to go through each one of them because it's by individual, even though
It'll re,
More or less than $500.
I'm sure it's probably
Less.
close.
Close to 500.
Well, Will's got 275 right there in
Wow.
bank. And I don't think Dawn has lost any because she usually takes it, and so does Evelyn.
So Will's already given back 275.
That's what he's got banked, yeah.
That's what's in his PTO balance right now.
Oh, it's good.
No.
plus,
what it
that,
is.
that's what's in his actual balance,
275
what he's
is the whole
contributed to the bank is 270.
Oh, I gotcha.
So if Will has an accident and he
He
can't
can't
work.
work for 8 months, he's covered here, and then he goes to this next
Then
bank,
he
goes
goes
to
to
the
the
next 27
Not
days.
8 months, but he'd be covered for approximately 7 weeks. No. Yes, approximately 7 weeks. Then he would request use of the PTO bank for anything additional. I think what I'm hearing here tonight is to go back, do a little bit more homework on how frequently we can cash out, any additional limits to cash out, and then find some way to encourage that taking of PTO.
Right.
Am I hitting the mark there?
And maybe review what other places do as far as like PTO accrual.
Yes,
In municipalities.
Yeah.
they're almost all vacation and sick.
But I'm not even saying
Like cash
vacation,
outs.
but no,
Cash out,
I'm saying the amount at which we accrue it.
yeah. Yeah, we can, I'm certain there are, well, you can probably get it to the listserv.
Because to me, if you accrue 10 hours of PTO for every 8 hours worked, or 80 hours worked, that's an insane amount of paid time off. And I get it, we're trying to keep people around, I understand that, but I don't know.
No, there's validity in your thoughts.
Because if we have people, I mean, I'm looking here, we've got PTO bank 200 hours, 300 hours, 150 hours, 135 hours, 237 hours, 101, 283. I mean, that seems like a ton of people. I mean, we've got a guy that just started that has,
Oh, they can't take it for 6 months.
I can take it for 6 months.
You
Well, they
gotta-
start accruing, but they can't take it right
Right.
away.
When, after 6 months?
6 months.
Should we force a vacation on after 6 months?
Again, it's hardest to do this in public safety, and it's gotten easier with another officer in police department to make that happen.
Well, I get it, these guys are, I mean, I'm not, they're working,
Yeah,
I mean, I get it.
yeah.
Well, there's also formulas that are used in some businesses or municipalities, I would imagine, where it's a percentage of your wage that you get if you take it in payout, where it's full pay if you take it.
You can, you know, based on how many years you've been there, I've seen it done where, you know, if you're here for 2 or fewer years, 50% of its value.
Right.
3 to 5 years, 75% of its
So
value,
that's
5
it.
or more of its value.
It's a vesting period.
Yeah,
Right, once the other way to retire.
But like Will, I mean, a lot of those, the reason why they're so high on the banked hours is because we took their sick, which they could cap out quite a bit on sick. So when we converted over to PTO.
And it converted 1-to-1, I mean, there was no,
I think so.
No, they would have lost some time on that conversion.
They did lose time, that's where it went to that banked. So that's why the bank, I mean, so you understand that they didn't just bank 275 hours plus they have 200 hours or whatever. A lot of that came from when that conversion happened from
A
sick.
lot of companies set a deadline on sick time, like if they transition to PTO, like if you don't use it by December 31st of 2010, it goes away.
Right, but then do you want your people to call in sick when they're really not sick? I mean, to use it, to make sure that it gets used?
Well, I don't know how you use 275 hours
I
of sick
don't
time.
You'd have to be for the state.
Well, you know. But,
Very good,
Just
doctor. Very good.
Somebody else.
Right. All right, I would recommend tabling this and bringing it up perhaps in the next meeting.
Motion statement.
Second.
so we had a
Don't we
motion.
have to rescind a motion?
Yeah, because we had Rob's.
Who made the motion?
Robson, Doherty.
All right, so we got a second, so we're gonna have to vote on that. My recommendation is to
Nay.
vote no for at least 4 of you. And then one of you who votes no should then make the motion to table.
all right, all in favor of passing the personnel draft as presented? Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion to table.
Second.
The second.
Sandy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, tabling the personnel policies. Next, we have park board resignations.
Thank you, Mayor. We've received resignations from 3 park board members. So the council may or may not know, park board is recommended by the mayor in September of each year. This year, 3 members have opted out. Continue, Bob and Joe Gassenbonson and Tim Buda. Park board is going to be reviewing applications of new potential members in August at their September meeting, and will issue a recommendation to the mayor for appointments after that. So I recommend a motion to accept those resignations.
So,
Second.
Did they give reasons for that?
I've talked with 2 of them. I think the mayor talked with 1. I can get into some of that, but
You know, I don't need detail, I just, is it, they just weren't happy, or they're too busy in their life, or?
I think a combination.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Cassie's been on quite a while.
She has.
Partners.
Yeah. I think her oldest is probably out of the programs.
Not there playing some.
No, but yeah.
My only other question was on this park board. You read in the policies that they have to be a resident of Lennox,
Correct.
and are we gonna look at amending that?
We need to amend it to
Since-
include the entire school district.
Since one of our members currently does not
Right.
reside in Lennox.
I would recommend amending it. I think, you know, given, so the current ordinance says they must reside in city limits, which isn't unusual, I don't think, but, you know, in a rural area, we're pulling people in from outside the city limits as well, whether from Worthing, Chancellor, or out the country. So I think there is some benefit to having that rural voice on the park board, so, if it's the general direction of the council, we can come back with that amendment next meeting.
Don't we have a precedent for that now?
We did the same with planning and zoning.
To do the same.
See, when I was on the Park and Rec board, or after I got off, I swear that our former administrator said that that was changed because we had Sean Granks, who lived in Worthington, I believe, at the time he got on, and then Chris Hansen, who lived out of town when he.
I thought we changed it too.
Yeah.
Before we got on.
There's no record of it though.
I'll look through minutes again, to make sure. I don't see anything in our files, but I think going through minutes would confirm.
Right.
So,
Okay, all in favor of resignations?
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0, passes. Next is fiscal year 2021 budget.
On that last one, also, those are 3 females, and we were trying to keep that as close to 50-50 as we can, so keep that in mind, I guess, when you're making your appointments. Instead of having an all male-dominated board, it'd probably be better to keep it.
That was the idea
Yeah.
originally.
so far, I've received 2 applications. I think there's more out there. 2 of them have been officially turned in at this point.
Gavel.
Thanks, Kelly, man.
Thank you, Mayor. On the budget, that budget, as usual, is due the last day of September. So this memo was just meant to give the council a bit of an overview of what we're looking at to the process. Really not much different than last year. We'll have a committee meeting at 6 o'clock on the 24th, if that works for the finance committee. Department heads will just have a few minutes to present their proposed budgets at that meeting for initial consideration and some feedback to those department heads. They'll use that feedback to revise the second draft of the budget. Those revisions will be due from department heads on September 7th. So that's September 14th, we can have our first reading of the budget ordinance. If there's further changes that council wants to make, that's the time to make those changes. We can do special meetings, of course. We ended up doing that quite a bit last year.
We did have a meeting on a Sunday night,
Yeah.
the 11th and a half hour,
Yeah.
which we will
40
not, we
we have
will not
45
be doing
seconds
that
left.
this year.
So, that would be our preference as well, to avoid special meetings for this round. So we'll do our second reading on this schedule, we do it on September 28th, which will give us a couple of days to get it in to the county. Any questions or any special requests for that process?
That finance committee meeting will be before will it be like 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock is what I'm planning on right now.
Are we gonna have any of the folks that whether it's ambulance or police or fire, come and speak at that?
I've asked all department heads to be there.
Okay.
Ambulance will be out of town that week, but we'll have at least a budget memo prepared for them.
And then next is fire department roster.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. And next into personnel, part-time grader operator.
And Mayor, for this, I'd recommend we go into executive session under heading A.
Motion to go into executive.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Give me the second, was it? Jeez.
Could have been operator.
No.